it's Coreyemmah here, and I'm coming to you with another episode from my series on Advanced Witchcraft, the review of the book by Edain McCoy. If you haven't seen my previous videos on first and second part of this book, then don't hesitate to check that out. I will link the videos in the corner of this video as well as below in the description box. This video will be focused on the water chapter or the water chapters, the part connected to the water element, and it is the third part of this book. I made several changes in approach to this book during my study. For now, I started using also this marker to highlight the most important thoughts because of especially the first chapter, the air chapter, the air part was incredibly thought-provoking for me. So I've been through the air chapter and through the fire chapter again, through the first and the second part of this book again, and I started also with the third part, which is the water chapters, where our mysteries await. And I have to admit that chapters in this part of the book are definitely not as thought-provoking as the first chapters were. The air chapter was incredible. I was really stuck in my thoughts for another week or 2 weeks before I found my way, how I actually feel and think about things and how I approach the different concepts that were in that part of the book. Then the fire chapter was connected more with the soul and with shamanism and another parts and another things, and that was partly thought-provoking and partly let's say theoretical. And the water chapter is quite theoretical, I must say, and in the end of this chapter there is a loads of list of correspondences and so on, which is not bad for this book. It's absolutely interesting to see the approach to different symbols as it is viewed by this author. On the other hand, I would like that wave that was started in the air chapter, even though air chapter is more about thinking, while the water chapter will be more about feeling. I didn't have that feeling that much that there's a deep work with, let's say, emotions, shadow work, memories, past problems, blockages, and all these things that I would normally expect in the water chapter. We found or touched a little bit of that in the water chapter. So that's like an introduction to this chapter. The water part is not that thought-provoking chapter, it's much more theoretically. Every single chapter or sub-chapter in this part of the book starts with "in the beginning." And then there's what we were basically supposed to do during our witchcraft practice to reach the point from which the chapter starts, the topic on which the part is focusing. And it is again very good to have this kind of checklist of if you've been through these things before you will dive into another step, another part, open the new door, open the new point of view for the same thing or for the new thing that will deepen your knowledge and your feelings and your intuition and your magical abilities based on the information in this book, which is good. On the other hand, I found out through these in the beginnings that this author is suggesting or talking a little bit in the way that when you've been through your year and a day process, basically like if everyone have been through the Wiccan process of becoming an initiate and becoming a priest or priestess or the first kind of degree in modern witchcraft Wiccan type. And while since I'm eclectic witch, it was a little bit like maybe there's still something that I didn't catch, that I didn't find out by myself or by my other teachers, since I haven't been through this traditional path and traditional practice and traditional teaching. Anyway, what was written here as the information that we were supposed to know or been through the experience, I was already familiar with it, which was good, that I felt safe to continue deeper and deeper. Also, there were some aspects or some parts that were interesting for me already some time ago, before I went to get this book. Also, one last note on the beginning before I will go chapter by chapter or subchapter by subchapter. The author is again very often talking repeatedly about things and saying things nearly in the same words, in the same sentences, 2 pages later or even 1 page later. And on the beginning I saw it as something that is really good, that is like telling us, hey, be careful about this is the important information. Here I must say in the water chapter it was rather something, oh, I've already read this, it's not anything special, why is it here twice or 3 times? And it happens constantly through this. So that's something that some people might be a little bit annoyed about, but maybe the author wanted to explain herself from a little bit different points of view or from a little bit different approaches on the same thing, even though basically the approach is constantly the same. Okay, let's get into it. So the first part is on the dark witchery. And it is talking about the left-hand path, about the importance of chaos, about shades of grey in the magic, and that only the intent of the person or group doing the working determined which energies were put into play. Basically here the author is saying that weather shines or docile directions don't really matter, that the thing that matters is our intent. Okay, our intention is definitely important. On the other hand, on the beginning of this book she suggested to start over with creating the circle, and then we should follow the rules of the circle, and that way also the directions that are positive and negative directions and are in somehow or some way working in our brain for sure. So that is the first part that is quite connected with chaos magic. I found some new information here on chaos magic or on Discordian tradition, which I absolutely appreciated. We must learn to embrace both order and chaos, just as we learn to embrace both lightness and darkness. We must know how to change one into the other and back again to make our magic work its best and to know ourselves fully. So basically that kind of yin-yang thinking of chaos and order. And here starts the theory part on the dark side of the moon and our inner being. Here are kind of moon and the sun put into the opposition, let's say, that the sun is our opened, shown self, while the moon sign and the house in which our moon is or dwells is something that is rather dark in our personality. And I would say that the moon definitely brings also some other properties than or abilities and other things than only some kind of dark side. I would then work with the Lilith, the dark side of the moon in the natal chart, rather than only with the moon, and I would personally not oppose the moon to the sun, or at least that's how I understood this chapter. We cannot afford to ignore our dark side, for it is part of us, and some of our negative or dark traits protect us. Yes, for sure. Also, there is a talk on the daimonic dynamics, which reminded me the books His Dark Materials, or Golden Compass, if you know it as as a movie. And often we must learn the lessons of the dark before we can have what we want in the light. This is something that led me again to kind of a discussion with the author. I don't think that we must kind of prepay the happiness with some kind of suffering. I think that the consciousness and the appreciation of the life as it is, and that it's a good life, that we are very lucky that we have the life, and how our life looks like, and on what kind of basics did we started our life is might be enough. There's not a need to always go through some kind of traumatical experience or through some kind of really deep problems to become more spiritual, to become more enlightened, to become more yourself, and to find or face your darkness and bring it to the light and balance it with the light. So I slightly disagree here with this little note. Also, I was quite long time thinking why in this chapter is never mentioned shadow work, because the author knows the shadow work. She was talking about shadow self in the fire chapters, but the shadow work and shadow self wasn't implemented in the dark witchery at all. So that was some kind of connection that I was a little bit missing there. Then here is a chapter 11 on the labyrinth and the maze, which is amazing, and it was one of the chapters that made me to purchase this book, because I was interested right in this topic about half year ago before I found this book. So I was quite happy that here's some information on this. There's obviously talk about the difference between the labyrinth and the maze, just a brief explanation. To put it in the fast words, the center of the labyrinth is a physical representation of the other world. So there's some kind of the way of crossing some kind of threshold, or going to some kind of other world or other place, underworld if you want. And this kind of walk is that liminal part of getting there. There's also different ways how to use the labyrinth, so that was absolutely great. The center of both labyrinth and maze are the realm of the divine. So it is one of the ways how to find or create the spiritual and sacred space and work in it, and it is another of the ways where the mythology can be shown and processed, where you can pass or open that kind of veil and pass through it to some other world. So it is a great tool for rituals, I would say. Of course, not everyone has the space to create a labyrinth or a maze, but if you can find some in somewhere around the place where you live, it's definitely worth visiting and kind of pathworking in it. You can also pathwork the maze or the labyrinth just in your thoughts during the visualization in your meditation. Another part is starting to be really quite a theoretical part. There's advanced tree spirituality. So this part is talking about why trees are important in our practice, how can we learn from them, and again I was understanding, or I was agreeing with some parts of these chapters, and I was slightly disagreeing with some other parts. There were some talks also on offerings for the trees, that their lifelong lives are bringing their long memories, and from that we can learn a lot. and then the author is basically talking about what properties of the trees should we know. There's like quite a long list. I'm not sure if all of it is so important to like write it down in our Book of Shadows, maybe in some kind of herbiary, maybe in some kind of other notebook or something if you are really connected to the tree lore. And then here are the trees and their knowledge based on the author. The great thing is that the author is actually writing here that it is important to realize that in each culture the plants and the animals and the birds and other symbols have a little bit different meaning, and that it's important to just dig yourself in the books and online and everywhere, and also in the history of your family and so on, and the stories, and to find the knowledge and the message of these symbols for yourself. Anyway, she still brings out here some information on the different trees, and she's basically mentioning all the trees from Ogham that are the trees, not the bushes, so there's also lovely information on that. Then the continuing chapter is on augury and advanced divination. There's a list of different ways of divination or different ways of augury, and there's an explanation of several different words connected to it, like hieromancy or herbomancy, hydromancy, and so on. Also, there's a list of the birds and there's their meaning, so birds and their meaning, again based on the experience of this author. And then we are moving to power animals and animal omens, where's again animal and its possible meaning. So this part is quite theoretical, just to write down the information one after another and then check it with your experience. And then in the end of this very chapter is the advanced tarot divination. There's quite a lovely talk about entering the tarot card and creating like the space or approaching the space of the tarot card and enjoying, experiencing the tarot card and what is happening inside of it. There's a little bit also on the static and moving things in that picture, if you enter it and it is static, or if it is moving, if there's something happening, and then when it becomes static you are leaving again this visualization. My experience on this is a little bit different, or the approach towards it, but I knew this meditation as well and I can really recommend it as well. So these are the water chapters. I must say that they were not that resonating with me in the way that I would have to think about it every time after every subchapter for a few days to just put it together in my head and in my soul, in my feelings, and then to continue to another part. I've just read them all together and then I just let myself to feel it, to kind of experience that new information that I found in it. And I must say it wasn't that deep as I would expect from the water chapters, but we shall see what will the next part bring, which will be on earth chapters. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope we will see each other in another part, and see you soon.